This mambo jumbo that you see here is a mini computer, and an actually decent one, the Beelink GTI14 Ultra. This mini computer has several interesting things, like a 16-core 22 threads Intel AI processor, Wi-Fi 7, a fingerprint sensor, an omnidirectional microphone, and even the ability to connect it to a dock so you can use it with a discrete GPU. But we'll get there. And before deep diving into that, I just want to thank Beelink for sending the computer. Thank you very much for review, and I also want to thank, of course, to the sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. The Beelink GTI14 Ultra packs an Intel Ultra 7 155H AI processor with 16 cores and 22 threads, and this odd configuration happens because we have performance and efficiency cores mixed together, what basically happens with every single Intel CPU after the 12th generation, at least on desktop of course. And this model also brings 32GB of DDR5 RAM clocked at 5600 MHz and a 1TB PCI Express 4 NVMe SSD. The GPU included is the one inside the Core Ultra 7 155H and features 7 Xe cores clocked at 2.25 GHz. And inside that same CPU we also have an NPU, the Neural Processing Unit, specifically for AI workloads, something that we'll see tested in this video as well. Small form factor computers are usually aimed at office workloads so companies can have a decently powerful machine with the minimal desk space required. And the GTI14 Ultra delivers. It is not just small, as it packs a lot of features most people will need or use. We have a processor capable of handling decent heavy workloads, 32GB, 1TB storage that is upgradable because you have another space to improve or to add another NVMe drive, Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.4, an omnidirectional microphone with AI voice interaction, a fingerprint sensor set on the power button that actually works very well, and several other quality of life features like built-in speakers and the SD card reader. And if you're kind of sound sensitive, you can know that the Beelink GTI14 Ultra most times works near inaudible or near silent at only 32 decibels. Let's hear the sound it makes when it's working fully. So we're playing Counter-Strike 2, as you can see, with the Beelink, and we've been playing for quite some time, and we have it at like 66, 67 degrees, and this is basically the sound that it does. And I'm pretty sure that you can actually hear more the children outside than the computer noise, and that's how little noise it does. It's really near audible, even playing CSGO for quite some time, and CSGO, not Counter-Strike 2, sorry, and yeah, just inaudible basically. And usually the smaller the computer, the more limited it is in terms of connections. But not this one. In between front and back, we have 2 USB 4 Type-C ports, 5 USB 3 Type-A, HDMI, DisplayPort, 2 3.5mm audio jacks, and a double Ethernet connection, and even an SD card reader. That is very practical for people that use cameras a lot, like me. And those little holes in the front? Microphones. Yeah, and they work quite well too. But we need to consider that the Beelink GTI14 Ultra costs around $700. So what is the real world performance in terms of productivity, office productivity, and gaming? For that I'm comparing it with the Minusforum Venus UM790 Pro and the Asus ZenBook S16. And after the benchmarks we're gonna talk a bit more about the features. Starting with Adobe Premiere and budget benchmark, we have the three SoCs performing basically on par with each other, since Premiere cares more about the GPU side than the CPU one. And in that department they're all really close. In normal conditions the Radeon 890M should be considerably faster, but not here, as the ZenBook laptop is locked to 32 watts. With Photoshop things get more CPU-sided, and the Core Ultra 155H can't keep up with the Ryzen 9 7940HS at 65 watts, but it nearly matches the Ryzen 9 AI Ajax 370. I mean, and it's pretty sure that happens due to its limitations of 32 watts. That consequently lead to lower boost frequencies that also lead to lower performance. As we go to Cinebench, things change, and we now have the Intel CPU delivering the highest single-core performance, which is actually nice, but barely matching the 7940HS when it comes to multi-core, even though the Intel CPU has 22 threads instead of the 16 on the Ryzen CPU. And the Ryzen HX 370 is performing better in multi-core because even though it has lower frequencies, well, and almost half the power draw too, of course, it has 12 cores and 24 threads, leading to a higher performance in multitasking workloads, of course. Now we're testing a variety of AI software with a computer vision benchmark from Procyon, where even though both Ryzen 9 AI HX 370 and the Core Ultra 7 155H have an NPU dedicated for AI, it seems the Ryzen 1 isn't supported yet. The Ryzen 9 7940HS and the Radeon 780M deliver the best results within the 65 watts power window when it comes to normal benchmarking, being 25% faster than the Core 7 Ultra 155H and 13% faster than the HX 370, since it can use double the power. Although, as soon as we start using the NPU inside the Intel CPU, we have it being 89% faster than the Ryzen 9 7940HS, which is almost double the performance. Very interesting here. As we move to AI image generation using once again the Procyon benchmark software, in this case with Stable Diffusion 1.5, the Intel NPU does work, and we do get a huge performance increase, with the NPU being many times faster than any CPU. The Ryzen 9 AI HX 370, as the name suggests, also has an NPU, but it isn't supported by the Procyon kit, sadly. Great results for the Intel NPU here. The first game we're testing is Plague Tale Requiem, and we have both AMD APUs surpassing the 40 average FPS mark, with the Radeon 890M most likely going over 45 FPS if it had enough power to do it, instead of the 32 watts roof. But even if we compare the older generation Radeon 780M to the Intel Arc one presented on the Core Ultra 7 155H, we have the 780M being 21% faster at only 8% more power. And with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, it is even worse, with the Intel integrated graphics being completely annihilated. In this case you might ask, well Fabio, but isn't the Radeon 890M faster than the 780M in all scenarios? Well, technically yes, but in this case the 890M is basically using half the power of the 780M, and still getting really close to it, which is already outstanding. The Intel chip also performs decently well, but not enough to compete with its AMD counterparts here. And what happened with Microsoft Flight Simulator also happens with Cyberpunk 2077, where the Intel Arc integrated graphics perform decently well, delivering up to 44.4 FPS when using XeSS, which puts it really close to the Radeon 780M here, which, again, is nice results for the Intel side, all things considered, with the Radeon 890M delivering an outstanding result, with higher performance than the Radeon 780M at almost half the power. But as soon as we use FSR 3 Plus frame generation, the AMD integrated graphics get even more ground, with Intel One getting roughly 60 FPS, while the Radeon 780M is pushing almost 80, being in this case 26% faster, which is nothing little. I would of course use XeSS with FSR 3 frame generation, but since Cyberpunk 2077 only supports FSR 3, I am obligated to use FSR 3 upscaling with FSR 3 frame generation. Going for The Last of Us, things are more of the same, with the Intel integrated graphics standing no chance whatsoever. And again, we have the power restrictions of 32 watts holding down the Radeon 890M considerably. Otherwise, it would be considerably faster than the 780M here, sorry. As we enable frame generation, things get even worse on the Intel side, again, with the Core 7 155H now being at least, keyword at least, 43% slower than the Ryzen SoCs here. What a massacre. And Resident Evil 4 is the first game where we see the Intel integrated graphics perform on par with the Radeon 780M. Refreshing, I would say, with the Radeon 890M being faster at half the power draw as well, making me think what the performance would be if we had this chip at, let's say, 60 or 65 watts power roof. But now let's go to the older and lighter games to see how these three chips handle them. Like GTA 5 for example. In this case I tested it using the inbuilt benchmark instead of the online mode for more consistent results, and it seems that the Intel integrated graphics do fairly well here, being on par with the Radeon 780M even with slightly lower power, like 5 watts. With the Radeon 890M delivering better results at lower power for sure, but with all systems delivering a very playable experience, especially with high settings. Moving to Counter-Strike, I'm pretty sure that you could run older CS versions like CSGO at over 250 FPS, but even though Counter-Strike 2 runs pretty well, it is also heavier, and the Intel CPU is barely pushing over 120 FPS even at low settings, which is not bad per se, just a bit disappointing. And League of Legends is the first game where the Intel integrated graphics surpassed the Radeon 780M, being virtually on par with the Radeon 890M, which is great for League of Legends players that want to play on an AI mini PC like this one. Finally, the first Wintel. Although with PUBG we go back to the Luztel, with the Radeon 890M performing once again faster than the other iGPUs while consuming around half the power, being 5% faster than the Radeon 780M and 20% faster than the Intel integrated graphics. And with Fortnite, oh boy, if you're a Fortnite player and you want an Intel mini PC to run it, just don't. Fortnite is arguably one of the worst optimized titles here, with the Radeon 780M being the fastest GPU due to a higher power roof, in this case 8% faster than the 890M, and a whopping 79% faster, I'll repeat it, 79% faster than the Intel integrated graphics. This should be a crime. Intel needs to work on their Fortnite optimization as soon as possible, as even their Arc GPUs perform quite poorly in this title. And we had recent games, multiplayer games, and now we have older games, starting with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This game brings interesting results, firstly because it is one of those games that added ray tracing support and upscaling support long after being released, and secondly because it can be both CPU and GPU heavy. Here we're using XeSS quality with low settings, and all integrated graphics are getting at least around 60 FPS. But since the game is both heavy on the CPU and GPU, the power-restricted Radeon 890M delivers slightly higher averages than the Radeon 780M, but considerably lower 1% lows. This is basically what happens when you power-restrict the chips. And if you think Intel GPUs run like crap on older games, well, think again. With Sleeping Dogs, we have the Intel iGPU really getting close to the Radeon 780M average-wise, but beating it in terms of 1% lows by 13%, which is not a small margin per se, with the Radeon 890M doing an outstanding job considering it is consuming again only 32 watts. Max Payne 3 is another legendary title that still holds very well nowadays, especially in terms of gameplay, physics, and animations. The Intel CPU is slower here, again, but still delivers around 100 FPS at maximum settings, which still allows a very enjoyable experience, with the Radeon 890M once again having lower 1% lows due to its power restrictions of 32 watts. But again, it is a very thin laptop, so that's expected. And to finalize, we have the 14 games average, with the Intel CPU being the base performance. The Intel Core 7 155H was a good competitor when it came to productivity, especially for AI-driven workloads, as it brings the NPU that can already be used in some applications using Int 8, but when it comes to gaming performance, it just stays behind. Meaning that the more expensive Beelink GTI14 Ultra performs generally worse when it comes to gaming than a less expensive mini PC like the Minisforum Venus UM790 Pro, in this case around 14% slower, leading us again to the same answer, that what really makes the Beelink GTI14 Ultra stand out is the features it packs. As you saw, when it comes to gaming benchmarks, the Intel integrated graphics are actually they don't perform as they should, especially in games like Fortnite and others. although in some games it does perform decently well, like Resident Evil 4 and League of Legends, for example. Although this computer should be aimed at productivity, and even there, it barely matches the Venus UM790 Pro with the Ryzen 9 7940HS and Radeon 780M at a higher price. So basically the Beelink costs more than the UM790 Pro. So I guess the strong points of this computer are actually its features that can be worth it, really worth it sometimes. Again, like in an office where you can have a plug-and-play experience with the inbuilt speakers and fingerprint sensor. And if there's a need to later upgrade the GPU for applications such as 3D modeling, for example, you can just get the multifunctional EX dock and use the GTI 14 Ultra with almost any GPU you want. The EX dock is basically plug-and-play as well, as it comes with an inbuilt 600 watts power supply, a USB connection, 2 8-pin power connectors and 2 external Wi-Fi antennas. To use it, you just have to connect the GTI 14 Ultra to the circuit board, connect the GPU you want on the board as well, connect the PCIe cables, 1 or 2 depending on the GPU you're using of course, and finally connect the power cable to power the dock and your GPU. After this, just turn on your dock or deck, whatever you want to call it, and the white LED will light up. And then you can just turn on your mini computer to make use of your external GPU. In this case, the RX 7600 XT. And it is great that we can use discrete GPUs with this mini computer, or most of mini computers from Beelink. The question is, can the GTI 14 Ultra actually handle, CPU-wise, can it handle the better graphics cards? In this case I was using the Radeon RX 7600 XT like I told you before, which is a low tier GPU nowadays. And there were some games where the Core Ultra 7 155H did its job decently, like The Witcher 3 we're seeing right now, and even in games like Counter-Strike 2 and Deadlock, even though we were being CPU bottlenecked, the FPS were fairly decent as well, ranging from 100 to 140. Although we did have some issues with games like Warzone, that when running the Battle Royale mode in Urzubskistan, I don't really know the name, sorry. When running the game in that mode and map, the GPU was constantly at low usage and the CPU was only delivering around 50 FPS, which is far from playable. Well, at least if you're gonna spend this amount of money on a system, because if you're gonna do it and it plays that bad, you're just better getting a desktop unless you really need that tiny, or unless you really have a tiny space, I would say. So do I advise you to get the Beelink GTI 14 Ultra? Well, it depends. If you want a plug-and-play system with lots of features and ready for AI workloads, then this computer is the deal. You have inbuilt speakers, fingerprint sensor, near silent operation and an NPU to immensely accelerate AI workloads. And on top of that you have the ability to expand your storage and later get a dock so you can use a discrete GPU as well. But unless you really need those features, it is kind of a tough sell against the Minisforum Venus UM790 Pro. I mean, if you don't really want these features, it is even a tougher sell against the Beelink SER8. That doesn't bring a fingerprint sensor, an omnidirectional microphone, less input ports, and it comes with older versions of other things like Wi-Fi 6 instead of 7 and Bluetooth 5.2 instead of Bluetooth 5.4. But it costs considerably less and comes with a Ryzen 7 8845S that also packs an NPU for AI workloads and comes with a Radeon 780M that is generally better when it comes to gaming. So conclusion, I would just get the Beelink GTI 14 Ultra if you really needed those features, or if you're buying it for an office, for example, where you can use daily the fingerprint sensor that works very well, or you need to record or do several voice calls or several video calls because you already have the inbuilt microphone, and a very good one actually, very good one for its works with sound isolation and so on, working with AI, so that's a very good thing. And you have things like the inbuilt speakers as well, so you don't really need to buy those extras, you already have them inside the computer. And of course, if you later want to upgrade to a discrete GPU, you can do it. Otherwise, if you just want a mini PC for some media reproduction, for some videos, for some light gaming like League of Legends and so on, then yeah, you're much better getting a Minisforum Venus UM790 Pro, or if you really like Beelink, because this one is a very good deal as well, just get the Beelink SER8, because you have generally a better, or well, I wouldn't say better CPU, but generally better in terms of gaming. You also have an NPU, and at the same time, it costs way less too, so yeah. So So I just want to thank Beelink once again for sending the computer. It has been working flawlessly for the past couple of months. Actually, I have it for months, but I wasn't able to make the video sooner since I moved to my new house, to my new studio, and I was still working out the sound, and I still am working out the sound, and we have several other things in the mix, so I wasn't able to do it earlier, so sorry about that. But so far we have lots of inputs, USB Type-C, USB Type-A, double Ethernet, etc. So in terms of features, this computer is a killer. It should be less expensive in my opinion, but I mean, it's a killer. You can even connect it to the dock with a PCI Express. So yeah, if you want performance, maybe you can go to the SER8, sorry, but if you want features and performance, yeah, you can get this one, Beelink GTI14 Ultra. Thank you very much for watching the video. Don't forget, hit like, subscribe and share it, and see you in the next one, guys. Cheers.